Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of the Hill and Brothers podcast. I'm your co-host Brandon Jones, and I am accompanied by the legendary Sam Simmons. What's going on, Sam?
Um, Things are good, I guess. Good as it's going to get. You got the. Personally, I'm fine. You got the chaos, going on around me, but I'm good. I mean, if we're going to go that direction, nothing to complain about really from that. So
Yeah, it's a balance, man. We got all types of stuff happening, especially locally. I feel like every time we have a podcast, there's a new catastrophe that is taking place. It's like there's no break, but you try to move forward to the best of our abilities in our individual lives, but we get to this place where it's like, well, damn, the community's still hurting too. How do we juggle that? How do we balance that as we keep going? So, but yeah, man. So, I'm maintaining myself, doing my best. It's unfortunate. Heard about the 3-year-old boy that was shot. I think not yesterday, but going into Saturday, Friday night. And we continue to have these issues within our community as we move forward. It's my soft spot's the kid. So when I hear things like that, I'm just like, I get to a place of what do we do now? Where are we headed with this?
well, my struggle with that part of the conversation is you say the soft bothers the kids, and I'm probably the same way. Um, um, you know, when people make statements like now they're shooting kids, well, in these majority, if not all of these situations here in Minnesota, they weren't they weren't shooting at the kids,
Right. Right.
right? And so there's a bigger piece for me, right? Um, um, and if we think about the earlier cases, one was they suspect was folks shooting across the intersection, the child that got shot leaving McDonald's with the grandma.
Mm-hmm.
We had incidents of that in the past where folks were just in the wrong place at the wrong time in the crazy world that we live in. You got, again, folks shooting at a vehicle, and they're, was they shooting at the adult in the vehicle and the kids get hit, shooting in the house where we got a beef at and the kids in the backyard, and in this last situation, because there's been, you had a kid before that got shot too. The last situation was in the house. They're still trying to figure out what happened in the house. This last situation, so you got the issue of if we do have guns, do we have them in secure places? So it's like recklessness everywhere, right? In terms of the use of guns. So, it's always, I think, more difficult to look at, a broader idea of what's going on. And so, the day comes down to, okay, there is a lot more folks riled up because it's kids. But does that mean that you're going to approach this any differently than you did before the kids got shot? Right. Getting on the news talking about enough is enough. It has to stop. And you're doing this, all on the news and stuff, and we can take up old newscasts from years ago. We could get old newscasts in 2019 and have that same kind of thing go on, right? Granted, it's happening earlier. um, and more consistently, or at least it feels like. Um, um, and I think for some folks, it puts them in a position of feeling helpless at times, right?
Mhm.
And because of these issues now that that it's including kids, so now even folks outside of our community are more interested when it starts being kids too. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? That's always interesting. Um, and so, how do you approach this? We also know that there's been a lot more in the benefit of, and I don't even know if it's a benefit. I shouldn't even use that word. Is that the interesting response to it is counter to what we were talking about, or what some people were talking about around policing, right?
Right.
There's been increased funding of policing all over,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And will continue to be more. We're
Yep.
quick to give that increased funding to policing. I mean that's just like right now, and people um, want to get upset about the term defunding the police, and because one of the things you got to give for proponents of that, and especially the Republicans, they know how to play words. They don't deal with facts, but they know how to play words, right? And so you dig into defunding police because it could mean so many different things. But the big piece was basically real allocating some of those funds to areas so police don't have to be involved as much, which in the long term is safer for the police and the community, right?
Mhm.
When you allocate more funds in terms of dealing with mental health episodes, um, um, dealing with some family episodes, some funds in terms of earlier intervention. People talk a great deal about activities for young people, and you're going to save some young people with that. At the same time, as grouchy as I am sometime, those funds going for young people, the ones who are still involved in the shooting, would they have been involved in some of those programs, would it would have stopped them from beefing the way they are,
Right.
right? Um, and because there has been less monies that go to uh, uh, community centers and those kind of things. There has been less money in terms of when you talk about school. Um, um, Monies were taken away from extracurricular activities that we know, if you even pay attention historically, kept kids busy, like music, those kind of things, right? Those things that interest them enough to stay in school, right? Now and the downside of being an old dude is that now you want to come back and say, studies are showing that you have music in schools, it benefits kids. Oh wow,
Mhm.
didn't we already know that? I know the only reason I probably stayed in school was because of shop class in music.
Sure.
You know, you know, um, at least kept my interest enough to know that if I didn't go to other classes, I couldn't go to shop class and I couldn't be in part of the music, period. Right. And so, yeah, it's just like, what are we going to do? And as we often say, what are you going to do on we're so always caught in the immediate that we almost seem like we don't have time or the bandwidth to deal with um the early intervention, right? um and we especially when we're talking about people in power, but we're also talking about folks within the community itself, But yeah, it's for me, is this been increasingly more frustrating for me than it has been even in the past. It's been frustrating for a long time, in which kind of fused the work I try to do, but it's been even more frustrating now, when it seems the creativity of things it's still there. People still being creative, but again, you know, it's a both and. We talk a great deal about systems, but we also have to talk a great deal about community, and quit um, looking at community from an old lens, right?
Mm,
And trying to find a new lens. And I don't mean some of the stuff that we try to glamorize about the good old days can't be effective, but they have to be updated, right?
mhm.
And I don't always think that we do a good job of evolving to updating things within the community, and that could be from the continued toxicity of dealing with the oppression and that comes from systems and those kind of things. But it just worries me all the way around. But the community piece worries me even more.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a huge thing that we need to focus on is what do we want black community to look like moving forward, because the way that it, not just to look like, sorry, let me back up, to function, because the way that it's functioned now, it doesn't seem like it's benefiting us as a collective. But to transition, and we're going to connect the points that you made back to our actual topic for today, which is racial battle fatigue. Now, racial battle fatigue is a term that some people may have heard, but a lot of people haven't. But many people have felt, especially black folks. And the term was coined, I believe, in 2007 or 2008 by Dr. William Smith, who is currently a professor at Utah University, and he kind of sums up racial battle fatigue as a cumulative result of a natural race related stress response to distressing mental and emotional conditions. These conditions emerge from consistently facing racially dismissive, demeaning, insensitive, and or hostile racial environments or individuals. And in essence, racial battle fatigue plays itself out in the day to day of many non-white people, but we're talking specifically about black folks. Now, I am someone who actually accepts this concept of racial battle fatigue. I think that I think there's some things that need to be tweaked in it, but I think it is a real phenomenon that many black people face, especially black folks who find themselves in what we call professional environments, especially for black people who find themselves in spaces where they're usually one of few, if not the only one. You have this consistent pressure racially to perform or to meet a standard that puts you at a place of jeopardizing who you are culturally and or ethnically or racially, and it adds this extra level of stress that can have health impacts later as you move forward. What are your ideas on racial battle fatigue, Sam?
Well, I think it's an ongoing kind of thing, and when we often talk about it, it really is how being black in white spaces is one example of it, right? How do you deal with the ongoing microaggressions, the ongoing pieces of how do you live up to this piece of always proving yourself, right? It goes back to that whole saying that I got to work twice as hard as my white counterpart to get, to move on, to get the recognition and that kind of stuff. So I think that kind of ideal and attitude, and I'm not saying is either right, not right, is this that, but that you walk in with a certain amount of extra pressure, and especially when you have that ideal, right? And my experience has been that I've learned along the way, and I've just been lucky, I guess, is I realized that, you know, I stopped working harder than my white counterparts and just started working smarter, right? Because it was too much pressure for, because I think that is starting to be part of that racial battle fatigue is you're working harder than your white counterpart. You got probably more education than your white counterpart, and you're still failing. How do you deal with that? Right? You still are not getting the jobs you deserve. You still not being able to maintain the job that you're in, and your white counterpart jumps over you. How do you deal with that? I mean, and when we talk about racial battle fatigue, if you look outside of the job, the racial battle fatigue is also around how we're represented. I was looking at some stuff because I'm still trying to work around how do we address not just racial battle fatigue, but other trauma experiences within the community. And one of the pieces that came out is when do like when we just look at movies and that kind of thing, right? And when so many of our movies is about our trauma, right? What kind of effect that has on us and people who look at us, right? So that's still around race, and it still wears us out, right? Even with all of the other things that's going on, is if every time you turn around, something involving Black folks is traumatic,
right?
It wears you out. It's like, we've had great movies that have come out around our trauma, and I think in some ways they they probably were necessary, especially in that historical factor. But because of the work I do, I own a lot of those movies, but I have yet to watch them. To protect my own soul, right? I failed to. I haven't watched them, and the reason I own them because I think they're important. I love the quality. I want to be supportive of the community because several of them were done by us. Many of them, they have us in them. But at the same time, when I'm trying to relax, that's not what I want to watch. That is not what I want to watch. Right. And some people get upset about that kind of stuff. When you say you don't want to watch them, because again, we have this all or nothing kind of response to people's ideas and opinions. Mm-hmm. But and then I even look at my own work around historical trauma. How do we have that extreme, and then we have the other extreme where we might glorify stuff in our community that doesn't really need to be glorified because they're not in the best interest. So how do we balance that, and what do we do to balance that, right? Because again, that also gets tiresome too. And and the professor who probably coined this really wasn't including some of this in that conversation, but when it's based on race and it wears you out and you seem like you can't get away from it, contributes to battle fatigue, right? So when do you get away from it, right? And then when you're going in and you want to take care of your family, I mean, the racial battle fatigue has been going on forever. I tell the story about my father at 46 years old, working for a factory, been welding since he's been 18. Um, um, his new supervisor is 21 years old, just left college, and he's calling him boy all day, right? And the anger that was seething in him by putting up with this boy, which is like almost it almost reminds me of a scene on a plantation, right? Boy, hurry up,
Right.
right? And you could have this young white person say this, but he's master's son. You can't do nothing about him.
Right.
You can't do nothing about him. And so and so that battle fatigue starts early, because you could be a kid in the school. Because I was having a conversation with a young woman the other day, and we was talking about uh, the characteristics of kind of a white supremacy institution. That's the new thing where they talk about perfectionism and all these different pieces, that are in a white can show up in a white system, and that whole parallelism, this whole thing of being the overseer and knowing better what is necessary, what is necessary for all employees, especially what's necessary, making for even your employees of color, black employees. In other words, I know what's good for you, so I make all these decisions. And I might let you have some input, but you really don't know, right?
Right.
Kind of thing, right? And so the story came down, and folks were saying, when have you experienced that? And there were several of the black individuals in the room talked about being in a classroom and having a teacher who was dumber than doornails, and you knew that the teacher wasn't saying the right thing, and how their response when they asked you and you gave the right answer, and they put you out because you had the right answer and they didn't. So, racial battle fatigue can show up anywhere, right? I mean, you got your job you got to deal with. You go to the coffee shop, and then after a while, that battle fatigue has you to a point where, is this real or is this not, right? And that's another round of stress, because the average black person I know, they don't want to be bothered with the idea of having to be aware of race all the time. Even
Right.
though, you may get white counterparts who say, all y'all do is talk about race. Well, it's right there.
Right.
Right? It's right there. And then they get into their intentions, and your intentions does not trump what I felt and what happened.
Right.
So they start talking about what their intentions were, and then all of a sudden, then that's supposed to end the conversation. Yeah, well, I didn't intend to not get that job because of my race, or I didn't intend to have to be, follow all your rules that you don't even follow, and then when I follow them, I don't benefit them from them. I don't come here intending to feel at the end of the day like shit because of all the little mini cuts I got to take in dealing with things around me and people who look like me. like I represent everybody who looked like me. I didn't intend to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I came across this new. I don't know if you heard about the new book that that Robin DiAngelo just came out with. Have you heard about it?
No, I have not heard about Robin DiAngelo's new book, but I'll Google it.
It's called. The title around it is "Nice Racism: How Progressive Whites Perpetrate Racial Harm." Right, and I scanned it or whatever, but she comes up with some interesting things. I mean, like for example, rushing to prove that you're not racist, downplaying white advantage, romanticizing black and indigenous and other color people of colors lives, pretending white segregation just happened, expecting people of color or BIPOC individuals to teach them all about racism, feeling immobilized by shame of being white, like somebody cares, right? you know, but that's all that or you go into a group and you do like you do, like we'll do a training and you'll get somebody in there and says, what do we do? You're speaking to the choir. Oh, that mean that what we just talked about didn't apply to you because you already, you know, hit the mecca of understanding. So it's them, it's not us. You're speaking to the choir. We get it. And that kind of thing. So I found it interesting. The reason I found it interesting is I see it,
Yeah.
right? As one person put, yeah, I know that I'm not going to a Klans rally, or if I do go to a Klans rally, I know what to expect. But when you going in, in an environment where you think or you feel we have these allies,
Mm-hmm.
allies,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can't even be you can't even be off guard then,
Mm.
right? And so it's exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausting. I think I've figured out ways to deal with it. My biggest way of dealing with it is as much as possible not to be over the years being be a part of the organization in a staff capacity, uh, um, and, and being more of a consultant, not chase every dollar. Uh, you know, Try to keep a certain value about myself that might have lost me money at times, but I was able to walk out with a certain amount of dignity and that kind of stuff. And again, not everybody has that kind of opportunity,
Right.
but that was always my mission. So it was a little easier to build my life around that mission.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that I'm rethinking even some of the work I do. Well, I've always rethought this. I can't wait for white folks to get it.
Right.
Right. I got to just do my work and hope they catch up. But most of all, hope we catch up.
Right.
Right. How do we help people with this exhaustion? Right. You know, you're stressed out, racial battle fatigue, and another example of that is you are hired in a supervisor position and your employees treat you like you are just another employee too, question you every minute of the day, your management, and it's
Right.
like, why are you questioning what I'm doing, right?
Right.
everything I say, you question it.
Mm-hmm.
And or the people who hired you, when you make decisions, they go after a few of their colleagues come to them, they overstep your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Being is like being in a power position without no power. It's like being a child in a dysfunctional home, the older child in a dysfunctional home whose parents tell you when they leave the house, you're in charge, right? And you try to act in charge, and you get punished for acting in charge when you get home because the other brothers and sisters say, I didn't like the way he treated me and he was mean to me, and they know they're setting you up.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been racially showcased.
Right.
Which I suspect there's a lot of that is taking place now, or we'll begin to see more reports of it due to the response after George Floyd's murder and all the protesting, and how we've seen a uptick in these diversity, equity, inclusion positions. I think you're going to see a lot of this racially showcasing behavior, and you're going to hear more from these individuals who've gotten these positions about how they were, they were duped. They were not given the leeway that they thought they were going to have, or when they're actually doing their jobs well, or they're trying to make change, they're getting railroaded or they're getting backdoored because their position was really more about show and not really about taking action. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I know that has happened in the past. And even for myself, I had with my new position and being literally one of two people in my whole organization that is black or that is non-white, let me say it that way. I'm the only black person. I have to be careful of that too, because at any point in time, my authority, being an executive director, can be challenged by somebody who should be listening to what I'm telling them to do instead of judging what my decisions are as the executive director of this organization. So it's a very interesting concept.
And you make a good point. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, but the key word is judging.
Right.
And you're right because there is a lot of folks, a lot of black folks getting hired in these diversity positions in these organizations, and you can go into one of these organizations and be aware of that, and you'll sit down with the person who is employing you, and you say, are you going to be able to support what I do? It's not going to be easy. There's going to be some pushback, and we know and I mean, we got friends who are in those positions right now, right? The staff push back, and I mean push back ugly, and and they asked the board, are you going to support me? It's not going to be easy. I'm gonna have to make some tough decisions. Oh yeah, this is what we want. And still have the board question what they doing. And the thing is, it was necessary to be done, but they didn't like how it was done, or they didn't like the fact that some of their little buddies had to go.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so and then I don't think we're always clear about that when we go in about this happening.
And a lot of it, I think, is due to not having the network or support at that level to know how to strategize when those things happen. I think a lot of folks who make it to this level are isolated, and it's important that we do support one another on this level and make sure that we're having these dialogues and having ideas on how to deal with these situations as they come up. And I don't think that's just special to black people who end up in executive director or CEO or COO positions, those C-suite positions, but just black folks in general. We need to do a better job at professionally networking and supporting each other, given that we know things like racial battle fatigue are a reality.
Yeah, and the response to it, because I mean, the thing is because you start identifying those things, and the other fatigue side is you have to not allow the fatigue to overcome you, where you do things that is going to make not only your life miserable right now in the moment, but make your life miserable in the future because of your response to the battle fatigue.
Right.
You know, because sometime, yeah, you were done wrong, absolutely, but your response to being done wrong can last a long time.
Yep.
And so the thing is we still have that certain amount of responsibility too. There's a woman who talks about responding to this, and one of the things she says that we come up short on is we do not document what's going on.
That's my number one thing. People come to me a lot, with situations that happen. They say, Brandon, what should I had? There was actually a colleague. She's a little younger than me, therapist, black woman, very talented, very skilled, and she worked for a Christian clinic. And one of the things she said to me, I talked to her probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and then we just had another conversation a few weeks back. And one of the original statements that she said to me was, she can't believe that this happened because these folks are Christian. She was like, this is not the Christian thing to do. And I said to her, and she laughed after I told her this, because I was like, just want to let you know I'm not the most religious dude. But I said, you should expect this because they are Christian, and they will use that against you. They will use their faith to justify their actions on you, which ultimately they end up doing.
Right.
And when I talked to her, like this was right before the 4th of July, she said, you know what, Brandon, when you told me that a few months ago, I didn't believe you. And that's exactly what they did. And they ran her out of that organization. And I told her, don't take it because she distraught. She don't know what to do. She's dealing with lawyers. I'm like, look, you're a black woman. You will get another job, and I'll do anything that I can do to help you land somewhere if you need me to. But don't let that experience of that organization, kill your identity as a person, and then your skill set and your abilities. And that's what racial battle fatigue does to a lot of black professionals, is you start to judge yourself and who you are and how you can do things. Now, like I said, she's a little younger than me. She's in her late 20s. So, and she don't got no kids or anything like that. So she's just trying to figure out all this stuff. But this is what ends up happening to a lot of black folks, is that we get into these positions, it makes us feel good. We have that soothing feeling. And then that racism pops up from one end or another, smacks us in the face. And we start questioning ourselves instead of questioning the situation that took place. And that's the danger of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The piece of questioning yourself, the issue of being bitter, right, and displaying that bitterness. But let's get back to that whole thing about documentation. This woman that I'm talking about, anytime she got an email from anybody, she sent a copy of that email to her personal account.
Yep, smart.
And had all of those emails as documents, especially in this day and age of email, because people so bold, they'll put shit in the email and don't think nothing twice about it.
Yeah.
And so because we that whole thing about documentation, we have because you can guarantee when their sites is on your behind, they documenting everything.
Right.
They'll even doctor up the documentation if they have to. Right. Mm-hmm. And so because you might still lose the job, but you don't have to lose the war. Right. And so, because thing is emotions is all good, but logic and logic and paying attention can keep you afloat.
Right.
Logic and that whole emotional piece, they done me wrong, and that whole thing about, my white counterpart did the same thing. I don't want to hear all that. I do not want to hear all that. Right? It's just like you told the young lady about Christians. Race always trumped Christianity. It
Yes,
historically always have.
that is true.
Right?
Yes.
In America, race trumps a lot of things. Right? And it's not even just America, but definitely in America. Right? So and a person smiling in your face and talking about we friends and working in organizations, we a family, man. Please, as soon as they start talking that family stuff, man, I worked for a place that got so upset with me. We're really a family. No, you don't have nobody look like me in your family. We ain't family. No, this is my job. Okay. And so because and ironically, talking about that family stuff, that same thing happened in black organizations too, right? We start
Oh
talking that
yeah,
family noise,
it's
it's
the
on and
flip side.
popping.
It's the flip side to racial battle
Yeah,
fatigue, anti-blackness, which is identical in harm,
right.
but different in how it is manifested.
Yeah, absolutely. Cause and then you got these organizations, and then we're in Minnesota. You got some here, but you got a lot more like out east that are on paper uh 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 where they're ran by black folks, nonprofits that are ran by black folks. Find out they're led by a larger white organization,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
I know several of them, right? And they and they pretty much let that organization do its thing from the black thing, but as soon as they step out of doing within that framework of the black thing, all of a sudden things get changed on you. Now you got folks who look like you carrying out the mission,
Mm.
right? Um, um, oh no, that's a little bit too black right now. As an organization, you heard that term too black. You don't want to be too black. I don't know what that means. Depending on whose mouth it comes out of. If it comes out of a white person's mouth, it could be everything. Come out of a black person's mouth, it could come. It gets a little narrow, but it come out of our mouths too black.
Right.
Instead of this saying, well, there's a better way you could say shit. Right. So, but yeah, so and we have to do a better job as black folks of really, really, really sincerely doing a better job at self-care.
Yeah, our well-being. Yep.
How much stuff you want to expose yourself to. You're already wore out. You're already just trying to maintain at work, and then you come home and you stay on online and we were just mostly talking about work, but racial battle fatigue is contributed to what we follow on Facebook and all the other online pieces, right?
Right.
Which anything that's tied to race that just overwhelms you,
Mm-hmm.
but you seem like you can't get away from,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're overwhelmed right now, and it leads. Yeah, we're overwhelmed right now with that battle fatigue,
Right.
because
What
it's
would
always like a fight. If I
yeah.
got to fight every day,
Right.
it almost reminds you a color purple. All my life, I had to fight.
Right.
Like you know,
But at some point you have to get to a point where you don't want to keep fighting all the time. Like you gotta still live your life and have some joy. And I think one of the dangers of racial battle fatigue and consistently being connected and seeing this stuff is that you feel like there's no end to it, or you feel like that you get hopeless. So what would you what are some of your suggestions on how people can address racial battle fatigue? What can we do?
Well, I think some of the things we've done working with Black professionals is making them aware of what it is, right? Because see, the thing is there's a lot of stuff happening to us as Black folks. We feel it happening, and we know it's happening, but we don't talk about this stuff amongst each other, right? And we don't put no reality to it, and we feel like and you mentioned this earlier, we feel like we're going through it by ourselves, right? Because we don't talk about this kind of stuff, right? Because sometimes just knowing what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing is real helps people, right? I don't feel crazy anymore, right? This is happening to me. So now when you can identify it and accept the fact it's happening, and we're not talking about get into is it fair or not. No, this is first of all accepting that it's happening, and then having a plan on how to deal with it, right, when it happens, right? Like that young woman that you was talking about, if she didn't have that conversation with you, right, she wouldn't have. I believe when it did happen, when they used the Christianity to come at her, it wasn't as painful as it would have been if she hadn't talked to you.
Right. Yep, I agree. She was just messed up by that. I was just like, girl, what else? What else were they gonna use? That's how they brought you in. They're gonna use the same thing to kick you out.
Yeah, and that's that other piece of recognizing. One of the times, sometimes we get caught up in is if you talk to us in a way that makes us feel good, makes us feel like you want us, so we need to check ourselves too, right? We need to check out where we at emotionally in our neediness to be belonged, right? Because the thing is we're devalued so often, and not just by white folks, by our own environment,
and other BIPOC people, other non-white. Like, one of her issues was if there was another staff person who was a Latino male, but I think he was like Puerto Rican or something. He identified more white than he did with his Latin side, which is a whole nother thing. But she was really messed up because she's like, dude, you should be understanding my experience because you are also from her perspective, you're a non-white person. But no, it was he wasn't the owners of the place. Those people were white, but he was someone who was causing a lot of issues for her too.
So, yeah, but see, it's bizarre to me when we want to brag about being unique. When we ignore our uniqueness.
Oh boy. Yeah.
I mean, you want to say we are unique. We're not just unique in terms of dancing. We're just not unique in terms of playing sports. Right? We're just not unique because we can spin words in a way that's so rhythmically. I can't even get out of my mouth. Rhythmically,
yep. Mm-hmm.
But we're also unique in our experience in dealing with this whole thing called trauma in America. I'm okay with being cool, with being in this collective ideal of togetherness amongst people of color and all this, they whatever the words are these week, right? But never forget our uniqueness also includes our trauma,
right?
In our experience here in America. Because that is another way of really lacerating your soul when you got this. Because I think part of it is we don't want to think like that with other people, right? I think that's what have saved me from really being down when it comes to me personally is. And people are, well, you're just negative. I think the worst until you show me better.
Right.
And that's nothing personal with the person. It got to do with, unfortunately, this complication of being black in America, that and not just include white individuals of or other people of color, but that includes my own.
Right.
And how that helps me is when it happens, I don't get angry. I get disappointed. And I don't take it personally. Because I know, if not all the time, majority of the time, it ain't about me.
Right.
Right? Because when we start making it about us, is where the major damage happens. And really understanding that this is the world we're in right now, right? We've been in it. It's just that, you over the last, 4 or 5 years, the bottle cap was taken off of the lie that everybody wanted to walk around with.
Absolutely.
And some of us who, and I'm not saying that all of you, if you want to be offended by it, some of us who are a little bit more aware and paying a little bit more attention wasn't surprised. And there were a lot of us, a lot of black folks wasn't surprised. Especially when we're talking about the nice white people who wanted to help keep the cap on, the wrapper on everything, right? All this subtle stuff, all this passive aggressive stuff that keeps happening, and some of us who hadn't learned to navigate that. And then the ones who haven't end up feeling like they're the problem. They might be contributing to the problem, but they're not the problem. Mm-hmm. So, but again, we can do what we can do about systems. Strategically battling them, because that battle is not over and not ever be over for a long time. But also be aware of how what kind of scars it causes you that you need to heal from. And it's hard to heal from something that is infesting you or scarring you, and you deny it at the same time. Right. Mm-hmm. And because you didn't realize what was happening, and again, you helped the young lady, it happened. Don't beat yourself up. There's enough people to beat you up. Yeah. To add to that. But I think we need to be a better job of having these honest conversations with each other. I know that some of the trainings we've done and people who attended them was a lot of young professionals who attended them, right? And they were thankful just for us to have the conversation. Is like, I knew this was happening, didn't have the right words, but to know that I'm not alone is going to help me maintain this job. Right. Or get me brave enough to go get another job and not make this mistake again. Mm-hmm. And on the side note, that whole thing around that religious stuff gets us every time.
Yeah, sadly. And it's not just Christianity. It's like all of them. But I'll get in trouble if I go there, so I'm gonna let that go. But we have to keep in mind that just because someone approaches you with the same faith-based beliefs doesn't mean that they won't cause any harm to you. I think a lot of people get caught in that trap sometimes. You do have to be on your P's and Q's. That doesn't mean that you need to be paranoid about everything, but you have to protect yourself in this world. And especially in spaces and places like Minnesota, because here it will feel so good until it stings you. You just got to be, and really in the metro area, but you have to be more careful than that. And that's the big thing. But I think that's anywhere, but especially in a state like Minnesota, where we are very progressive in the metro area, but culturally, and this how things function, it doesn't always show up that
way. Progressive until we're not.
Exactly.
I mean, that whole idea of Minnesota being progressive is why people were shocked to buy George Floyd outside of Minnesota, right?
Right.
It's like Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota. It's like, Minnesota wasn't number two of the worst places for blacks, especially in the country, second to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You know,
The
number
state has. Go ahead.
well, but scored high among white professionals. So
Right. Right. I mean, there are a lot of things the state has to offer, but boy, you got to go through a lot. There's a lot of hurdles and hoops that you got to deal with to get the full benefit of it. But again, when you don't have strong community support and everybody is working collectively together, it makes those challenges even worse. So there are a few things that I wanted to share, just some tips for folks as they're dealing with things like racial battle fatigue, microaggressions, which we didn't talk much about, but we talked around it. But these are things that show up for people. So I'm gonna share these things real quick, and if you have a response before we wrap up, feel free to add to them. But these are just some things that I typically share when I do trainings around racial trauma. So for black folks or non-white folks who are dealing with being victimized by the system, doesn't mean you have a big victim mentality, but you know that something has happened to you. The first thing you have to do is understand that something has or is happening to you. Like, this is not something you're making up in your head. These are things that are actually going on. You need to have confidence and pride in who you are. So not losing sight of who you are and how you are as an individual, and being okay with that, not hating yourself because you show up in a position where you might be one of few, or you might be the only one who represents your racial or ethnic group. You have to understand that you have values that do not need to be validated by anybody else. Your values and experiences are your values and experiences. They don't have to be accepted or validated by anybody else. They just need to be respected. And you can't even control that piece. You can't control if somebody's going to respect it or not. But if you're comfortable with it, that's what's important. We need to also seek places and experiences that help us heal instead of places and experiences of acceptance. And that's a big one, because a lot of times we want to push the acceptance piece and understanding that we need spaces that are helping us move forward and helping us, have well-being instead of places that are just tolerant of us being around. And then lastly, the last thing that I'll share is stop trying to get other people to get it. That is not your work. That is their work. You can spend a lot of time and energy invested in trying to get other people to get, diversity, get it being an anti-racist, get being, progressive, or whatever term you want to use. But if you go ahead and spend all that energy trying to get them to get it, well, meanwhile, life is going on. So you have to figure out your own balance with that. And I see a lot of my peers, especially because I'm a little younger, my younger peers spend a lot of time trying to convince mostly white folks to get quote unquote diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't think that's really a good use of your time if you're trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced all the time.
So, the question I have about what's the thing about the spaces?
Yes, find spaces and places of healing and not necessarily just acceptance. Yeah.
And how does that fit with a job?
So again, what is your purpose of being on the job? Are you there to advance your career? Is this just the way that you're paying your bills? Is this a healthy environment for you to be in? And that's subjective based on yourself. Sometimes you might have to come to a conclusion to move to a different position or to a different type of job because that place, that space, or that profession is not healthy for you. So that's what I would say for that piece. Go ahead.
Yeah, and yeah, I wanted you to, you know, um, emphasize that because one of the things, especially folks who work in the helping profession, one of the issues that we have to be clear about, a lot of the young professionals and older ones too, when they do the work with the mission of a lot of times of helping the community.
Yep.
And then they get into an organization that they feel like that's not their mission.
Right.
You just got to remember that's your mission.
That's your mission. Yeah.
Right. You know.
Yep. And if you
Go
don't have
ahead.
that support, if you don't have that support to live that mission out, you might have to make an adjustment to go somewhere else. And that's a hard decision for people to make, especially if you're getting paid well. You getting them benefits, things of that nature. But if it's eating away at you internally, you might have to make a pivot and do something different or work for a different organization.
Or if you can't do that right away, figure out ways to realize why. That goes back to why when you realize that that's not what they're about, then you might have to transition to, I'm here to take care of my family. Right. You ignoring a reality don't make you feel better.
Exactly. Couldn't say it any better. Couldn't say it any better. And there's a lot of people ignoring reality right now, and they're gearing up to go to that painful place tomorrow. That's the sad part about it. All right, folks. I think that's going to wrap us up for today. This has been another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Healing Brothers, and make sure you share this episode if you found it constructive amongst your social media networks. And we will see you next week at 3 p.m. Central Time for another great episode. Thanks.